Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Quorum Podcast. This is where academic medicine meets remote, austere, and resource-limited areas. Welcome back to the program. This is Aebhric O'Kelly. This week, we are with Jørgen Melau, who is a PhD researcher in Norway. Jørgen, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
So tell us a bit about yourself and what's keeping you busy.
I am currently in the Norwegian Armed Forces as a researcher in the cold weather operation medical research team that is newly started in the Norwegian Armed Forces. So, that is what's keeping me busy. So it's mostly hypothermia and human performance in the cold and cold weather operations that I am working with at the moment.
You did your PhD on cold water immersion, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Or actually cold water swimming, to be precise. I did a PhD on extreme triathlon participants and also the naval special forces that does long swimming in cold water. So that was the base of my PhD. That's right.
And that's what I did in the Green Berets as well. I was on a maritime ops team, so as scout swimming, mainly on top of the water in cold environments with wetsuits and dry suits. And I definitely am looking forward to this chat with you.
Yeah, I think cold water swimming and also cold weather operation is very, very interesting. So I'm looking forward to this.
You've also done a bit of tropical medicine in Liverpool.
I've been in Liverpool at the doing some tropical medicine there, but just small courses many years ago. So yeah.
And we met in north of Oslo in a military base last summer.
Yeah, we did. I really can't remember at the moment what course you were there for, but you were an instructor, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, we were invited in to teach tropical medicine, a 5-day tropical medicine course for the Norwegian military.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But it was great to meet you. And you've popped up all over the place on social media and research and PubMed, and you have your fingers in a lot of pies, and it's very impressive the research that you've turned out.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
And even tourniquet use. I see that you've got some publication on firefighters using tourniquets. So we'll get to that in a bit. But the elephant in the room is going to be the cold weather. So my question to you right off the bat, what is the best way to warm a cold casualty?
Oh, you're going straight to the
jugular.
Yeah. Well, I get similar questions to that a lot. A lot of organizations and also private persons ask me similar questions a lot. What is the best way to treat or a hypothermic patient or to keep them from being hypothermic? And the thing is that it's so hard to answer that question because there are no kind of like magical kit or gear that will suit everybody. It is very different for a Green Beret or a special force operator jumping out of an airplane in high altitude. What he or she can carry, it's a lot different for what a medic on a rescue vessel on sea can carry. So it is a very hard question to answer. So my take on that is that it really comes down to knowledge and knowing what you need for your certain type of operation and context. And then you have to build your kit around that. And I also think that you need to be able to improvise. And with improvising in this context, I mean, you have to be able to use what is around you for a good hypothermia kit. from my time as I've been working a lot outdoors, pre-hospital care, and also on a air ambulance in the Arctic. And I did see several times people were wrapped in a rescue foil, or the space blanket, and their head was resting on a sleeping bag, but they didn't use the sleeping bag. They used the rescue blanket, and that is kind of like the type of knowledge that I really try to teach people and preach to people, that you need to know some basic, let's call it thermophysiology, in lack of better terms, just to use what you have for a hypothermia prevention kit. I also see that there are a lot of new types of gear and kits kind of like popping up, and they are said to, like, do everything for a cold patient, but it still has to suit your operation or your environment. And I think the answer to your question is that knowledge about heat, preserve heat, is the most important part of this. And it's not actually, it's not very hard, but there is so many kind of old-fashioned anecdotes, making it a bit hard to people, but it's not that hard to learn for medics around the world in different operations. It's certainly not hard to learn how to treat hypothermia in a very good way with quite simple gear, actually.
Yeah, a lot of the industry wants to sell you tons and tons of stuff to keep, and it works, doesn't it? There's science behind it, but I'm not going to jump out of an aircraft with that strapped to my waist. And it's a challenge in austere environments where sometimes you have to improvise techniques to keep warm and still follow evidence-based medicine. So what improvised techniques have you seen work for the hypothermic casualty?
Well, I don't know if you could call it improvised technique, but what we tend to use very often in the Norwegian Armed Forces, and also in the Norwegian rescue services that I also am very familiar with, is that we do use sleeping bags, and that is because they are nearly always there. So every soldiers, they do have a sleeping bag. If it's winter, they have a thicker, more insulated sleeping bag, and in summer they have a thinner one. And also, if someone is out camping, they have a sleeping bag. So we do tend to have the basis around using a sleeping bag. So that is, and you can improvise a lot around sleeping bags and sleeping mattresses and things that already are commonly used at or near the accident sites. So they are very often available in the context where you are working.
Definitely, it's not very often out and about you're going to be without a sleeping bag, and possibly put one inside the other if need be as well, just to get more trapped air.
Yeah, certainly. So we actually, is one of the things I've been quite busy the last few weeks, as you know, because you have tried to reach me the last couple of weeks. But I've been, well, let's say I've been in the Arctic and doing actual testing and scientific testing on different types of hypothermia wrapping material, and most of that is based around the sleeping bags that's already in the armed forces. And if they are made for soldiers to sleep in, then they are very good for treating hypothermia casualties or preventing hypothermia. And we nearly always come back to use the sleeping bags as a very good base for hypothermia prevention.
So I'm sure it was quite cold further up down here in Germany. It only got to -5 about a fortnight ago, and I was able to do a bit of a research project on Mylar emergency blankets and hot water bottles just to see if they're bollocks, if they're absolutely rubbish, and of course they are. But I found that three layers of the Mylar blanket was doing a bit more protective measures equal to a blizzard blanket. On the blizzard blanket, do you guys carry that in the Norwegian military? It's a 3-layered blanket, the aluminum foil blanket.
No, that's not very commonly used in the Norwegian armed forces, but some kind of other types of services like the police and some other Norwegian professionals are using the blizzard blankets, and they are very helpful because they are obviously smaller than what the other things that we are using, but that's not very commonly used.
It's because they're rubbish, aren't they? Is that why you're not using them?
As a researcher, I should be a bit careful with what I'm saying, but we don't use them. We need the insulation, and there is not much insulation in a blizzard blanket. There are some insulation, but not very much at all.
When we were teaching prolonged field care up in RS out of Horton, that's and for those who aren't familiar with Norway, that's the civilian Coast Guard. They were showing an orange tarp wrap kind of hypothermic option that looked pretty keen. Is that something that is common?
Yes, that is called a Jerven blanket. It is very common, and all Norwegian soldiers have a Jerven blanket in their backpack. At least all that are out in the field have a Jerven blanket, and that is kind of like you probably can say it better than me, but it's an insulated blanket that has multi-purpose use, and we have used that for many years. And it also has a waterproof, windproof outer layer, which also is very helpful in terms of hypothermia prevention. So one of our go-to kind of like systems is to wrap the patient in a sleeping bag, or put them in a sleeping bag, and then wrap the Jerven blanket outside of the sleeping bag. And we've been testing that method on several types of temperatures and environmental conditions, and it's really good. And what is best about it is that we always have it available. So that is the Jerven blanket is a very good one. I'm not actually sure if that is a common thing in other countries, but in Norway it's very common also for civilian hunters and things like that.
So it basically takes the existing sleeping bag and adds an outer layer that is going to be weatherproof.
Yeah, and it's also have some insulation in it. So that's all. Yeah.
What we had in Special Forces was a Gore-Tex outer layer. So we had 4 layers, 4 different sleeping bags tucked into each other, and the outer layer was the Gore-Tex that really did make a bit difference. It breathed, but yet kept a lot of the moisture out.
Yeah. So there are different kind of systems, and because what is the most the things that we have to work the most on to improvise is the outer layer, and there are different versions on how to do it. You can use a Gore-Tex layer, you can use a tarp, you can use a tent, or you can use other types of blankets that have a wind and waterproof layer. But Gore-Tex will be very good because then it also can breathe out some of the moist and humidity from the burrito wrapping.
Are bothy shelters common enough up in Norway? It's just basically a big tent without any poles that you throw over yourselves, and your body warms it quite quickly.
Um, we use shelters, yeah. So but we don't have any kind of specific type or brand that we use. But shelter is a main focus when we get a casualty in the cold. But we tend to use our petrol tents for that. Maybe just slip off the inner tent and just use the outer tent. But that's it's different on different types of units and also the mission you're on. But we usually have some types of tents available.
Nice. When I was working on the Hems in Budapest, we had a large roll of bubble wrap that was about 2 meters wide, 2 meters high, and they would roll off 2 meters of bubble wrap, cut it, and then wrap that up and take it on each call, and then wrap the casualty in 2 meters of bubble wrap. Now, it doesn't get as cold as yourself in Norway, but it was brilliant because it was weatherproof and it trapped air.
That is a system and a solution that has been used for many, many years in Norway. In nearly every ambulance, we have rolls of bubble wrap. And there are also manufacturers that do kind of sell pre-cut bubble wrap, special made for ambulance services and air ambulance. But we don't. That is not that commonly used anymore because we need much more insulation than the bubble wrap can give us. So when we have been testing them, they don't perform as good as a sleeping bag or other types of insulation material combined with a water and windproof outer layer. But still, bubble wrap is much better than a single space blanket or mylar blanket. So I wouldn't recommend against it because the bubble wrap is helpful, at least in certain situation and contexts. But we tend to not use bubble wrap as much now as we used to do some years ago.
Is that because, I mean, you're in minus 40 or worse? Would that just be so cold that the bubbles in the bubble wrap get so small they're not really helpful?
The insulation in the bubble wrap is not very. They don't have a huge insulation value at all. So the bubble wrap is mostly helpful for protecting from wind and rain, and the insulation is just it is too less of an insulation when you have a real hypothermic patient and also a bleeding hypovolemic casualty. The insulation is just too little. In 40 degrees minus Celsius, I really can't tell or remember. I haven't seen that the bubbles get smaller in that temperature, but I really can't remember, so I can't answer that. Sorry.
Yeah, it works here in mainland Europe, but it's probably not going to work up in northern Norway.
No.
The coldest I've ever been was minus 40 in northern Canada, and when I was on active duty, we invaded northern Canada with we had the CH-47s land. We got our snow machines out, and we were kind of trying to invade, and we very quickly got our arses kicked by just the normal infantry in Canada. It was just so cold that nothing worked. It was just abysmal. And note to self, don't invade Canada. And imagine it's the same way with Norway. Don't invade Norway. It's minus 40 up there, and it's just nothing, unless you're Finnish, there's nothing you can do. The Finns are really good at minus 40 as well.
Yeah, they are. And probably our that's a bit hard to say, but our enemies are probably also very adjusted to the cold weather, so we have to be prepared to fight in cold weather.
Yeah, unfortunately, that might be the way forward. So tell us a bit about your other cold research.
Yeah, I could tell you a bit about dexterity. You mentioned swimming in cold water. I should start with that. When you do swim in cold water as a military special forces operator, the swim is just kind of like a way of transport. So the real mission is when you get out of the water, because then you might climb onto an oil rig or on a ship or something like that. And what we found in one of our studies was that the dexterity, the manual use of your fingers, is very much decreased after a cold swim, and so that is something that we need to look much more into. It's very obvious when you think of it, of course, but we need to follow that up and try to find better ways of protecting the dexterity, because that has a huge impact. For instance, handling a malfunctional weapon, or doing many types of military and also civilian tasks, and not to say the least like a survival. If you are in a survival situation, you are really dependent on your dexterity. So that is something we need to look more into. We get a lot of, or we are exposed to, I should say, a lot of new types of gear. Like you already have mentioned, the salesman says that this is the best there is, and we are able to test it in field condition and also in a lab environment to see if they are as good as they say, and they usually are not. We are going to test different types of medication and the use of medication in cold. And if the medication are frozen, can they be torn and used after they've been torn again? So yeah, that is some of the things that we are looking into.
I definitely remember the dexterity issues whilst working in cold water, and I also remember beach assaults. Once you've been in the water for 45 minutes, finning or getting to the beach, and then once you stand and get out of the water, there's hemodynamic changes, isn't it? Have you addressed those issues of being in 45 minutes in cold water, and then once you get on the beach, it's just so hard to walk, let alone run, because you're used to being in the water.
Yeah, that is why actually my research background, why I started to do research, was from a triathlon, Norseman Extreme Triathlon, which is a really hard and tough triathlon here in Norway. And in triathlon, you have kind of like the same issue. There are so many similarities to military operations in a triathlon, because when you are swimming, first of all, you're horizontal, and then also your body is have a small pressure from the water surrounding the body, and when you get out of the water, you lose that pressure, and you are also normally at least vertical, and then your hemodynamics change. What we also find in one of our studies is that when you are exposed to cold, your muscles starts to work to decrease in strength. So we did measure strength and power before and after a long swim, a 10,000 meter swim in cold water for special forces operator. And then we found that also the power and strength was decreased. So there are really some, as you describe, some challenges with a cold water insertion because your nearly your whole physiology is stressed, and there are changes that you need to be aware of doing a beach assault or an assaulting a ship from the sea.
I can imagine triathletes having a harder time because they hit they finish swimming and they hit the beach and they get up and they start running, where we would hit the beach and we would be in waist deep water for a while, getting used to standing, getting our kit ready to go, but more importantly, surveying the beachhead to make sure that we're not going to assault straight into a pillbox or something. We had time, where these triathletes are just rushing out of the water.
Yeah, and they jump straight onto their bike actually, and they if the bike ride is technical, you have to use a lot of brakes and do a lot of steering and stuff like that. It can be really dangerous, and that is actually why I started my PhD. Uh, because of this triathlon that I'm very connected to as an organizer. So that's the same thing. Rushing out of cold water is very stressful for the physiology, and something that we need to be aware of and also look more into. So yeah.
Well, at least they're not carrying the rucksacks that we were carrying. I mean, we were dragging 30 kilos of lightweight stuff, and then trying to transition that in shallow water into carrying that in our backpacks and then standing up. Fighting gravity at that point is rough.
Yeah.
So, Jørgen, what is the next breakthrough in Arctic medicine?
Well, I am not sure that we are doing the hypothermia prevention the right way. There is something about the burrito wrap system that we need to challenge. I am not that certain of how we should use the vapor barrier, for instance. I think we have some. I don't know if we will have a breakthrough, but I think someone at some time will have a breakthrough in how we care for hypothermic or prevent hypothermia in casualties. So I think I believe we will get some breakthroughs in how we do the burrito wrapping in the next, let's say, 5 years.
That's interesting. So the burrito wrap, well, there's always room for improvement, of course, but what do you think is faulty with the burrito wrap concept?
I don't think it's faulty, but I think we can do much better, as you say. And I think one of the first thing we have to challenge is the vapor barrier. And I also think that we have to look into the different layers. There might be better ways to do it. I'm not sure yet. I'm far from sure, actually. But what if we what if we think of the casualty and dress the casualty the same way as we dress ourselves when we go out in the winter? That is that we have wool and layers next to our skin, so that the moisture and the water is transferred from the skin and all the way out and away from the patient. That could be a possible way of preventing hypothermia and treat hypothermic casualties. But this is something that I'm certainly not sure of, and I really want to investigate it more. But there might be other ways of treating treating hypothermia casualties and use the hypothermia wrapping in a different way. And I also think that the vapor barrier, wrapping the patient in a vapor barrier, is supposed to give 100% humid environment around the skin, but that is practical nearly impossible to do because you are not able to get it 100% tight, and then you lose much of the effect of it. And again, even if you are able to get 100% humid environment around the body, there is still heat loss from the skin. So we really need to look more into that and how the best way to do it is. I also do think there might be alternatives, different alternatives to do a burrito wrapping the best way at different environmental conditions. That is, if it's very, very cold, you might do it in another way. But if it's, let's say, plus 10 degrees Celsius, then there is another way to do it. But that is also something that I'm not that sure of yet. In fact, I'm not sure at all. But I'm just planting a few seeds here to have something to discuss for the next couple of years.
Nice. Yeah, more research is always needed.
Yeah.
One of the challenges we have at the college is accessing the casualty after they're burrito wrapped. So we wrap them up, happy days. Oh, now we've got to assess them and recheck their vitals. And what we've done is we put the BP cuff on upside down, so the lines run outside of the burrito wrap, and then we put the stethoscope underneath the BP cuff right on and tape it right on to the AC area where we can get the BP, and then we run the ECG lines out to the shoulder as well. But we found that like more and more of these Bluetooth options are brilliant for assessing the casualty whilst keeping them wrapped. Are you using any Bluetooth, or what technology are you using to keep assessing your casualty whilst they're burrito wrapped?
Yeah, and we try to do as much as possible without using any powered equipment, because power is so hard, or batteries are so hard to use when it's very cold. But we do certainly do test and use Bluetooth or similar technology to monitor the patient, but that is not something that is let's say commonly used. That's more used and tested in specialized units. We have been testing a few temperature monitoring devices, and of course also SpO2 and heart rate and stuff like that. But one of the things that seems to be coming from several companies is ultrasound plasters or some kind of tape, ultrasound tape. Wow. That you can attach to the neck of the patient. And that is very interesting, but because then you can possibly monitor cardiac output, and then you have a very, very good monitoring system of your patient. It is so hard to monitor patient during evacuation in the Arctic. The patient are maybe on a polka or on a sled behind a snowmobile. They are packed in loads and loads of insulation and backpacks and stuff like that, and it's really, really hard to monitor. So we really want to use, if we can, some powered monitoring devices, and the ultrasound types of plasters, that's in lack of better word, that you can attach to the skin on the neck. it is very promising, but it's still a long way until it is useful for everybody. But that is really something that we yeah, have hope for.
Yeah, I saw that when I was teaching in Norway. It was some sort of, looks like a big Band-Aid that you put on the neck that has sensors that would give you some observations of some of your vital signs of your casualty.
Yeah, there are different types of developers and brands on that, and there are several brands that do kind of like SP Auto and measure heart rate and stuff like that. But ultrasound is a bit of next level, and it's very very helpful in terms of a very good monitoring system for really bad casualties.
Jürgen, my last question is this. What advice do you have for the new doctor, the new paramedic, the new nurse, or the new PhD researcher who is just starting out learning about austere medicine? What would you tell them?
Well, that is, I do believe that knowledge is so much more important than your gear, because your gear is important, but your knowledge and how to use your gear and how to improvise gear from other types of equipment around you, available equipment, it's so important. So I think that is my best advice for new medical professional in austere environment.
So I completely agree with you. And Dr. Sean Keenan, who created or was on one of the founders of Prolonged Field Care, is always saying that it's people over product. It's people. It's what you know. It's the training over the kit that you have. And you're absolutely right. We need training. We need experience. We need clinical currency to be better.
Yeah, certainly that is so true. So I agree fully.
Well, Jürgen, it's been ages I've been trying to get you on, and it was great to have you on our podcast. And thanks for being our guest today.
Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure being here.
This has been a presentation from the College of Remote and Offshore Medicine. If you would like to earn CPD credits for this podcast, you can join the Council of Members. Being a member of the college gives you free CPD credit, free access to our virtual field guide, and discounts on our e-learning courses. You can join the team on our college website at quorum.edu.mt.